Hey guys, welcome to a special episode that we're doing. I'm doing this episode because, and this is going to be something. If you're looking to learn more about Nicaragua, or you're living here, or you're potentially coming down to move, or you're just doing research, anything that gets you involved. If you're watching this channel, you're going to be bombarded with false propaganda, with attacks on everything is going to be fake news. And I want to dig into something because one, I don't want to delete a known spammer and have someone say, oh, he's deleting posts and he's trying to keep, silence things that he doesn't want them to hear. I'm so the opposite of that I'm going to read and post what was said. I don't want this to stay because this person we're going to show created an account just to post a fake story. But we're going to dig into it because this is an attempt to copy a story that was done about a year ago. And I did an article on that one 10 months ago. And so we're just going to dig in because this is important. And I want you guys to, one, see that there's patterns of propaganda. If you work on my side, where I'm getting bombarded with Reddit and lots of, I see every post that gets made that YouTube doesn't filter out, and there are really standard, just copy paste, it's so lazy. The spam, the propaganda that's being put out to try to discredit Latin America, Nicaragua, I don't know. But so I had a video. This is funny. I had a video that this was appropriate for, that his response would make sense, but he's not on that one. He went to a 10-month-old post where I talked about the vaccines you get before you come to Nicaragua, because someone had asked. And you don't need vaccines before coming to Nicaragua because there's no particular disease to look out for. There can be an outbreak, and during an outbreak, there may be a specific thing you would get. But in general, you don't get vaccines for coming to Nicaragua. It's the same as being in the United States. So there's a lot to dig into because this is propaganda that is clearly written by professionals, and it's a copy of one that was written previously. So I want to dig in. I want this. Okay, so first of all, we're just going to start with the highlights. The account that posted this is John Beatty. The account was created today. Right, so this is not someone who knows anything about the site. He's not been following. Went and dug up a 10-month-old article from me that is not related to the problem. It's about vaccines like malaria, dengue, that kind of stuff, yellow fever, not related to what this is about to be about. He then posted this very false and misleading information. And I'm just going to say it. Every word of this is a lie. Except for a little bit in the middle that isn't relevant to his situation. I'm going to say that every single thing he says is a lie. And one of the powerful tools of propaganda is that we, especially as Americans, as North Americans, we are trained that it's a faux pas to call out other people even on really obvious lies. We're not allowed to do it. You're in school, your teacher lies to you, you're not supposed to say, that is a lie, no matter how much everyone in the room knows. And when you don't say it's a lie, it reinforces those things. So there's tools that are used in propaganda to repeat these things over and over again, and we start to accept them and say, well, I've heard it a lot. Yeah, but you knew it was a lie each time, but you started to forget. So I'm going to dig into this, and I think you're going to find it really interesting on this very short post. So I'm just going to read it first, and then I'm going to show you why all of it is fake. So first of all, new account, and then it doesn't come up with a username. So there's something that his account hasn't even completed yet. A dangerous and misleading post. Remember that he's not commenting on a post related to what he's talking about. I'm in Nicaragua now. I was bit by a street dog a day ago. The government deemed my wound not big enough for the vaccine, so I'm boarding a flight to the United States tomorrow and at least $10,000 of shots. It is settled science that the size of the wound is irrelevant as long as there has been saliva to blood contact. In America, the health authorities would attempt to quarantine the dog and make life-saving vaccines available when the science seems it medically necessary. In Nicaragua, half measures and unsound practices for tourists and their citizens. Okay, so except for the statement, it is settled science that the size of the wound is irrelevant as long as there has been saliva to blood contact. Every single word of this is a lie. That one sentence is absolutely true, has nothing to do with the scenario. So, we've already covered literally everything in this post in 10 months ago, 4 days before the post that he posted this on, we disputed a fake news report out of Australia about a girl that was bitten by a cat here in Nicaragua. And you can watch that video. I will do my best to link it here. It'll definitely be linked at the end of the video. I will definitely put a link in the description. Definitely watch that. This was a copy of that, reworded with dog instead of cat. They changed the $60,000 of shots to $10,000. Everything else is just a copy. So, first of all, dangerous and misleading post. He's not referencing anything in that post that is dangerous or misleading. So that was he just wanted to try to discredit good information about Nicaragua. He says he's in Nicaragua now. You can very safely assume he is not. I was bit by a street dog a day ago. It's very safe to assume he was not. Now, to be fair, if you saw my video that came out probably the same day as this, I was nearly bitten by some street dogs, and I showed them. There are many street dogs in Nicaragua, and getting bit, while I don't know anyone who actually has been, I'm sure is a common occurrence and is in no way rare or weird. You would assume that people are being bitten by dogs all the time. Okay, so that's reasonable, but it's not true in his case. The government deemed my wound not big enough for the vaccine, so I'm boarding a flight for the United States tomorrow and at least $10,000 of shots. At this point, everything falls apart. So first of all, and I have, because of the other article, spoken to doctors and medical centers in Nicaragua about this scenario. So I know exactly what the situation is here in Nicaragua and what the response would be to it. So first of all, the government did say they would not give him a vaccine because there is no vaccine. There is nothing to give him. There is nothing that he needs. The size of the wound is irrelevant because the only reason that they would be worried about the wound is if it became infected, which any wound could be. That's what they're looking for. As long as the wound isn't infected, there is no vaccine to have. He doesn't state what magical vaccine you're supposed to have when bitten by a dog. The only one that makes any sense, and only makes sense to Americans, if this event had happened in the United Kingdom, for example, their response would have been the same as Nicaraguans. There is nothing to do. The United States and Canada have a relatively high, not that high, just relatively high to the UK and Nicaragua, incidence of rabies. And rabies is very scary. And Americans and Canadians are very scared of rabies because it's something they have to worry about. However, you rarely worry about it in a stray dog. You worry about it from a raccoon, for example, and you never have to worry about it from a possum. Just fun facts. But you do have to worry about it, but it's generally wild animals. It's very rarely a dog. If you are bitten by a feral dog in the US or Canada, then you probably do want to get a rabies shot because there are very few feral dogs and they are at higher rabies risk and no one's checking in on them. So there's a number of things that make in the US rabies something scary. That's why we know this is written for an American audience, because if you were writing this for a Nicaraguan audience, anybody who lives in Nicaragua would instantly say, "What vaccine are you talking about?" Anyone in the United Kingdom would not naturally think of rabies because they don't have rabies. But that's the thing about Nicaragua. We also don't have rabies. We aren't at zero rabies. United Kingdom's at zero. They have none on the island. But here in Nicaragua, we have none in populated Nicaragua. There are no dogs known and no humans have had contact with rabies in Nicaragua. It's not a thing. Does it exist in the jungle? Yes, it does. Could it, under certain circumstances, migrate into populated areas? Of course it could. Has it done so? No. Therefore, is there a vaccine for a thing that is not a risk? No, there is not. That would be crazy. That would be unsound healthcare. So they did exactly what they're supposed to do. So he describes Nicaragua doing exactly what should be done in Nicaragua because this is not the United States and rabies is not a concern. If you're in the United States and the same thing happened, the risk of rabies would be astronomically low, but not in the approaching zero as it is in Nicaragua. Not in all cases, in all of history, it was zero, as it is in Nicaragua. So in the United States, out of an abundance of caution, they generally will give a rabies vaccine, regardless of the size of the bite, because the size of the bite does not matter. That is a red herring that he stuck into the middle to make it seem like he had some foundation for needing a vaccine, when if you thought about that this was Nicaragua and not the United States, you would automatically know that there's no reason to have any vaccine whatsoever. There's nothing to get a vaccine for. Here in Nicaragua, should there be a situation where there is a known exposure to rabies, which is not from a street dog bite, they do have rabies vaccine available, and they will give it to you. If you were to go to the public healthcare, so keep in mind the only claim here is that the government deemed his wound is not big enough. That means his claim is that he went to the free public clinic to get rabies vaccine. They followed the correct procedures and did not give him one. However, if you want a rabies vaccine here in Nicaragua, it is available. And you are free to go to private healthcare, which is available everywhere in the country, and pay for it. And it is not very expensive. It's certainly expensive for a Nicaraguan, and it's not the kind of money you just spend for no reason whatsoever. But if you have a personal concern about rabies, you have the opportunity to go to any clinic you want in the country. That will probably redirect you a little bit, but you can go pay for the rabies vaccine and have it anytime you want. That means he was unwilling to get the rabies vaccine. He intentionally did not get the rabies vaccine for, I believe, a few $100s. I did ask, it was not very much, but it's more than, a COVID shot here in Nicaragua. So he turned down either being willing to pay for or accepting a rabies vaccine, knowing it was not important. He also, should he not be able to get one in Nicaragua, for example, if they ran out, or if he truly ran into a roadblock and they would refuse to give it to him, what would his options be? Well, given that he's located in Nicaragua, the logical options to get rapid healthcare, if he actually believed there was a concern, would be to immediately travel to either Costa Rica or Honduras, where they also have the vaccine, they also have public and private healthcare, and would be more than happy to provide that to him. If they did not have it, he could easily travel directly on to Panama, El Salvador, or Guatemala, all of which are very nearby, all of which have the rabies vaccine, none of which have rabies problems, and all of them would be willing in a private clinic to sell him a rabies vaccine. So he had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, if any of this was true, to get the rabies vaccine without spending very much money or very much time or effort. A little bit for sure. If for some reason you truly ended up I went country to country and none of them will give me the rabies vaccine because I'm a raving lunatic, well, at some point it's going to start becoming a little bit of an effort. But instead of doing any of those things, his claim is that he decided to board a flight for the United States where apparently he does not have insurance. So he acts as if he's an American. We don't know that he is. And in the case of the Australian cat one, the claim was that it was an Australian tourist and they couldn't get to any place that would give them health care. Australia wouldn't give them the health care. Nowhere in the Americas would give them the health care. So they had to go to the United States. The United States being the great savior of rabies infections, right? That's part of this story, that somehow America is willing to save you from rabies. Yet America has rabies and other places don't. They leave that conveniently out. So he says he had to pay $10,000. Why is he paying $10,000 for a few $100 shot? We have no idea. But that's what he's doing. And why did he go to the United States to get it? We have no idea. And why is he waiting a day to go? Probably doesn't make any sense. You can normally get flights within a few hours. They're not full. Could be full, not generally full. In America, the health authorities would attempt to quarantine the dog and make life-saving vaccines available when the science seems it's medically necessary. Yes, they would. The American healthcare system is not insane. Of course they would. But they also have rabies to worry about. So all of that makes sense in America. That's what American healthcare facilities deal with. American healthcare. In Nicaragua, half measures and unsound practices for tourists and their citizens. There, he's making quite a stretch, given he just described that Nicaragua did exactly what they should have done and protected him from spending, apparently, tens of thousands of dollars flying onto a country he didn't need to go to for no reason, all for an exposure he completely made up. This is super important because this is something that comes up from time to time. You're going to see, I can't believe that they repeated this one nearly word for word, changing only the tiniest things, cat for dog, 10,000, 60,000. But this stuff really does come up, and you can see that the way it's phrased, the way that it's presented, it doesn't even make sense to anyone except an American and maybe a Canadian, who they're hoping will jump to the conclusion they must be talking about rabies, because in those countries there is rabies exposure and you would quarantine and do those things. They also left out that, of course, if even with American authorities, if they were magically teleported here in Star Trek style and were sitting here in Nicaragua, they would have no opportunity to capture and quarantine a street dog unless he captured it himself at the time. Unlike the United States, where a stray street dog would be very identifiable and you could say that is the dog, everyone saw it, it's the only dog around for miles. Here, there are street dogs literally everywhere. I had at least 8 that could have come into a biting me contact today. I want to be clear. I walk barrios, I walk the street, I walk talking, I make noise, I go right through where dogs are. I do essentially nothing to ever avoid dogs. The number of times that I have been bitten here in Nicaragua is literally zero. Never. However, I do see opportunities where I could see someone getting bit. If you were afraid, if you were skittish, if you reacted poorly, if you ran away and the dogs chased you, there's times where you could have gotten bit. I am relatively good. People have commented how good I am at dealing with dogs, so I understand I'm the outlier in not getting bit for the amount I'm walking around. The average tourist will not have a situation where they're coming into contact with street dogs that might bite them. That is never going to happen. So unlikely, because all the dogs in the areas where tourists are used to people. They don't go around biting people. But, it could happen, right? Street dog bites. This is Nicaragua. You have tons and tons and tons of street dogs. Eventually, someone's going to come into contact with one and get bitten. I totally understand that aspect of it. But all of this is only believable. And this is a very standard thing with the propaganda. A lot of the words that are used in a lot of the propaganda, if you were to read them to an audience outside of the United States, they would sound really positive. If you read this to a Nicaraguan, to a Guatemalan, to a Brit, they're going to go, well, yeah, they certainly wouldn't want to waste your money and make you get vaccines for something you couldn't possibly have gotten exposed to. But in America, it seems reasonable. Well, we can get exposed to rabies. They must be able to get exposed to rabies too. Logical conclusion, but it's not true. But I had to look into it. I had to call doctors and find out. And they're like, no, there's no rabies here. It's not a thing. We have the rabies vaccine. If you were to come with it exposed in the United States and came here, you would get a rabies shot, probably for free. But not $10,000 like it is in the United States, right? So there's so many questions here, right? Why didn't he get the rabies shot here that he had the access to? Why is he going to the United States when he has to pay $10,000? Why doesn't he have some way to get the insurance? Why is he upset that Nicaragua wouldn't give him the shot for free, but is okay that he's going to the United States, who is also not giving him the shot for free? Notice this. This is really important. He only mentioned that Nicaragua didn't give him the free government shot. There is no government shot in the United States. There's only private health care. So he's not comparing, even in this, he's not making any claim that he's being comparable. He's actually demonstrating that the United States also would not give him the shot. The thing that he's leaving out is the pointing out of the comparisons. He's not pointing out that America also refused to give him a free shot. He's also not pointing out that he could have gotten the shot here in Nicaragua for very cheap and without a flight and right away. And he's also not pointing out that one does need it as part of standard course and one does not. If he got to the United States and those doctors gave him a vaccine for this, they are being reckless and unprofessional, because they should know that you only give it when there's a possibility of exposure. You don't just give out rabies shots willy-nilly for no reason. That doesn't make sense. So he should, if all these things are true, which they're not, none of this is true, if they were true and he actually went to the United States, no competent doctor is going to give him a rabies shot. They may still charge him $10,000 for being a lunatic, but they're not going to give him the shot. So I think this is important. And for sure, get down in the comments. Let me know what you think. Other things you've seen like this, definitely go watch the cat video, because it was like the exact same thing. And immediately we deemed that one was made by an Australian fake newspaper. It was like a newspaper-ish thing. And the article itself pointed out at some point in it that it had no reference. There was no name for the person that it happened to. There was no name of the location it happened in. There was nothing. There was absolutely no substantiating information whatsoever. There was no way to look it up technically, because the person, the hostel where it was supposed to have happened at, the cat, all of it was fabricated. None of those things were real, and there was no source material for it. Literally, the newspaper was the actual source, and it didn't cite like interviewed a person or anything like that. There was nothing. It was hearsay from an unidentified source. And normally an article like that you get just like this one. There's no name, no location, no nothing. So if we say, well, of course they're available, they'll say, well, not in, and they'll start naming cities, hoping it's one we don't know. Should we do a response? But that's the kind of things that are done, right? Leave out the information and then change it. And I happen to know that this particular spammer And I realize that this is a new account made today, but we can see that it's connected to other accounts that have been being used for exactly this purpose in the past. So we know the pattern of this one, and we see that it has a lot of the speech and posting patterns from a very specific type of propaganda. And there's just a lot of this. And we have had in the past accounts that were created that would post a lot of seemingly innocuous information. Oh, I like this restaurant, not that one. Oh, I'm so happy about this festival, not that. And then suddenly they would post something illegal, something very propaganda-y. But if you were paying attention, and I happen to, because we're just not that big of a channel, there's not enough of you. No, this would be great. More of you need to get down, leave comments, and ask questions so that I can't actually read and remember every single response people have. But in this particular case, I was really well versed on the fact that the account was conflicting with itself. It would constantly give advice to people based on, oh, I love to do this thing for this reason. And then a few weeks later, it would say the exact opposite. I would never do that thing. That's stupid. I do this thing for this reason. And it was clear that they were going back and forth because they weren't actually keeping a cohesive story. They weren't familiar with the voice of their propaganda post, probably because they're working on lots of different projects across a lot of different places, and they can't remember that they have like a semi-cohesive story. They probably kept a couple notes and think, well, there's no one's going to pay enough attention to put together that I said backwards things, opposite, conflicting things. But I found it because I comment every time when I'm like, your logic doesn't really make sense. Why do you feel this? And sometimes I'm wrong. That happens. Not with this guy. But, when it's legit people, I'm wrong all the time. Right? But that made it was really clear that this was a pattern where he would do a whole bunch of stuff to establish credibility by having a lot of posts, by having the account around for a while. And then he would post really bad fake information. Like really clearly the whole thing was a setup, and it would be out of nowhere. It would not be in context. So it was like they had gone through, they hit a threshold, and we're like, okay, now we can post the thing we came here for. And they would sneak it in, and they did exactly the things that, and they weren't even paying attention to the post, because I would say, do not do misleading, they're called leading questions or leading comments, where you try to start a discussion and the thing that you hide as the foundation is the actual disputed thing. Like, since all tourists are murdered when arriving in New York City, why are you traveling there, right? And it makes people try to engage on why are you traveling there, and it forces the brain to try to accept that all tourists are murdered. So later, when they're like, wait, oh no, your brain just starts being like, no, I accepted that all tourists are murdered. That's the lie, right? Obviously, all tourists are not murdered. That makes no sense. But if you slip it in that way, it seems like you're presenting it as established fact that you can't question. And of course, you can always question, but it's presented in that way, and it triggers that you're not supposed to call people out on being liars. So if you said, why? So there's just a question, right? And it feels you're not attacking the person. You're attacking the city, the tourism, the industry. You're trying to hurt tourism there by making people who read it and by making the person that's responding think that everybody is accepting that all tourists are murdered because millions of people didn't jump in and dispute it, but they're trained not to, and a whole bunch of people don't read those things. So I'm going to take this down. I'm going to delete this user because they creating an account for a bunch of fake information, not okay. And we're just not going to accept that stuff. And I've had to do a lot of that this week, and it's all completely garbage stuff like this, nothing that's real. But I don't want anyone to pop up and be like, there was a thing that was taken down, and have someone have seen it, because this is super important, but it's a copy of the cat one. So watch the cat one and be like, oh my gosh, it is exactly the same propaganda repeating, and I guarantee we're going to get another one, because just like the last one, I posted a thing in the morning that said, do not, I will delete you. There is absolutely zero tolerance if you do this leading thing where you put in fake information in this leading way where you're obviously like, it's not something that happens by accident, right? And they did it that day because I sensed it was coming. I could tell they were looking to do it. So we had to take that account down because that's all they did. And there was nothing legit that ever was seen on that account. But some of it was just kind of, you couldn't really tell. So, okay, thanks for sticking with me, and thanks for taking the time to understand why these things are fake. And just accept that, being in a place wonderful like Nicaragua is going to cause just having a site like this, a community like this, we're going to get trolls. This is not trolling. This is propaganda. This is a thing that we see whether I'm there or not, whether there's popular posters or not. We see this across all kinds of platforms for Nicaragua. So in the same vein, though, by having a popular, pushing the term there, YouTube channel, we're kind of on the radar. And in having that, there's some people who just want to troll. They just that's what they do. But in this case, by having a country like Nicaragua, that is such an example of how well things can be done, just how much the system can work, how many public works infrastructure things can come back to the people. It's just a great example of a lot of things, and that makes countries that are not doing a good job, whether in that area, all areas, we're not saying all areas, right? But in some areas, it can make them look bad. And that makes some of the people who live there feel badly, but generally that's not a problem. People go, wow, other countries are doing a better job than my country? Nice, maybe I'll move. That's why you're all here, right? But you also get people who work in that government who are like, we can't be exposed on this. Either it just makes us feel bad, maybe it makes our jobs at risk. Maybe it risks a larger exposure, that there's more that is being kind of buried and they don't want people asking questions. And there is a natural push to silence, to make Americans not look deeper into what other countries are like. And you see this a ton in healthcare, right? Why do so many Americans believe America has great healthcare, yet never go out and sample other healthcare systems? They never even look into the stats. Why are France and Italy just blowing the US away statistically at cost, tax base, all these things in their healthcare? Oh, they just believe that it's all made up, right? But you go to those places and it's really apparent really quickly. But even you come to Nicaragua and finding out that our healthcare is so much better than the United States, it really catches people off guard because they do so much work in the US to get you to not look any deeper. You don't need to look. Ours, we're not saying it's the absolute best. We're saying it's so good, you don't need to look. Theirs is terrible, right? Don't even go there. You'll just die. It's so, and that's what this is trying to, there's just no health care here in Nicaragua. And yet he described how they did a better job at lower cost, right? Charged him nothing, did the right thing. How is that a bad thing? It's not. He didn't even have to make the claim. Most people reading it would simply read into it and assume that something bad must have happened given the tone. It's magic how marketing works. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. Buy me a coffee. That would be wonderful. And, feel free to post down below. Ask more questions. All this stuff. I'll see all of you tomorrow.